Allison Bitz, and I am a lifelong Nebraskan. I grew up in rural Exeter, Nebraska, which is about 50 miles west of here, and then moved here to go to college to Lincoln and did not move back and to my hometown. My education, so I got my undergrad at UNL, and then I went back and got a master's and a PhD there too in counseling psychology. And so in terms of my career now, I am a full-time licensed psychologist in a private practice, and then writing is the thing I do in addition. Yeah.
And I'm Alena Bruzas. I'm from Seattle originally. I've been in Nebraska since 2013, so math is hard. I think that's like 12 years.
Yeah.
12 years at this point. This is my home. I'm going to stay here forever. I love it. I moved here for a job, but basically quickly fell in love with Lincoln and Nebraska, and so I will never leave. Writing is my passion, and it's the career that I love the most. But I also am a bookseller at Francie and Finch, and I do some editorial work. So it's kind of just a hustle, you know. How can I support myself so I can also write? And I didn't finish college, so I don't have an education. Self-taught. I love this question because my first two books had nothing to do with Nebraska. I wrote them both living in Nebraska. The first one evolved. My first book is called Ever Since, and it takes place in Seattle. And it's really, a lot of it's based on my upbringing. And I went to high school in Seattle, and I didn't start writing it really with the serious intention of getting published until I lived here. And then my second book takes place in Virginia. It's a historical fiction about Jamestown. My third book, which I just announced, which is coming out in July of 2026, takes place in Nebraska. And it's absolutely inspired by my love of the prairie. Willa Cather is an inspiration for just her descriptions of the prairie and how much she loves, the grass and the sky and everything. It's so beautiful. It really inspired my writing. And it's funny because Karen Russell just had a book come out about kind of like prairie magic. A prairie witch is her main character in the book. And this book, which I've been working on for quite a while, it also has prairie magic in it. So it's sort of it's based on a Brothers Grimm fairy tale, but it takes place in the Nebraska prairie. So, yeah.
Love that. I like the question a lot too. I feel like it's a bit hard to answer because I feel like I am Nebraska. Like I've been here forever, and it's kind of like, I think about this saying a lot. How do you explain water to a fish? That's Nebraska and me. Very similar to Alena's arc here. My first two books don't really touch on Nebraska a lot, except for in Bridget. She originates in Nebraska in Lynch, which when I wrote that book, I didn't realize Lynch was a real town. And so every time I do any kind of media interview, I'm saying, I'm sorry, Lynch, this is not hate to you, it's not shade. I just didn't know that was a real town name. My bad. But there is a lot of commonality in rural towns of Nebraska and kind of how they think, how they operate. And so I feel like there's probably some reality about how I wrote the Lynch in my fictional brain, because it was based on my hometown of Exeter. Versus the real Lynch. My third book, or what I hope is my third book, is based in Nebraska. And it's really kind of a love song to how beautiful it is here and the way small towns work, because this is a very small town, like where I come from, and that's a different culture, and one that I studied. My dissertation was on rural college students or rural people when they come to college, and how well do they adjust versus people who come from our urban areas to urban colleges. So it's something I care a lot about. I've been thinking a lot about for years, and it's really interesting to infuse some of that cultural stuff into the books I write. The most significant people in my writing life have been my critique partners, actually, I would say far and away. Laura Taylor Namey and Joan F. Smith, they are both writers primarily in the young adult space, although Joan now has some adult books coming out. I met them in 2017 via a Twitter pitch competition when we were all unagented new writers trying to make our way in the industry, and we have talked literally like every single day since August of 2017. We've now done multiple visits. We go to each other's book launches. I read everything they write. They read everything I write. So they've been just so highly influential, and now they're, you know, not only my work partners, but they're such dear friends, and I'm just so grateful. And I was the last of us to sell a book, and they gave up on me, you know. So I think between us now we have 11 books out and 13 under contract. Maybe it's 15 now. I lose track. So yeah, we call ourselves the Tank, and it's really cool.
I would say women, like all three of my books at this point are about women and their relationship with society, and a lot of it is about how women deal with oppression. My first book is about sexual abuse, and how, not just how, like, if somebody who's experienced the abuse, how they deal with it, but also how our society is so hard on young women who are navigating their way through, you know, discovering their sexuality, and how they have relationships with whoever they're attracted to. And Anita Hill, I would say, and Chanel Miller were two just major inspirations for me. They both wrote really powerful books about their own experiences, and it really impacted, it was really cathartic for me to read those experiences with these women who came up against incredible power. And maybe both of them, I don't think, feel like probably in their goal, you know, Anita Hill's goal to, I don't know if it was her goal, but she came forward to speak out against Clarence Thomas, and he still became justice. And, you know, I would say the same for Chanel Miller. Her rapist didn't really go to jail for very long. There wasn't really justice done. However, when they spoke about their experiences, I think it had such an impact on our society that I would say that those are success stories for those books. And it made me feel less alone reading them. So when I set out to write Ever Since, it was absolutely with that in mind, knowing that writing about your experience not just can be cathartic for you and get your story out there, it can be cathartic for your readers and make them feel less alone. And mine was a little bit different from theirs because I'm writing about a teenage girl who experienced child abuse. So not exactly the same, but similar enough that I felt really inspired by their work. And my second book, which is historical fiction, there's two actual historical figures that really, really compelled me. And they were both, one of them was murdered by her husband during this time in Jamestown before it was a colony, when it was really still a fort. And then the other one, we don't know what happened to her, but they found her remains, and she was, you know, probably a teenage girl who starved to death in this time. And they believe that because she was healthy until she starved. A lot of people starved in this time. That's what the whole story is about. But she was probably loved. But her story, and just the fact that they found her remains and they reconstructed her face and took so much care to present her to the public, was really beautiful, and it really inspired me to dig into this story about these women who were subjected to this life. They were probably brought there by the men in their life, and they suffered for it. And I would say, again, with my third book, I mean, it's a little bit different. It's not really about somebody who's dealing with abuse or trauma. It's finally a happy story. But Willa Cather and her experience here, and reading her just beautiful lyrical descriptions of the prairie, I think it taught me to love Nebraska in a way that I didn't. Like, I love Lincoln, but you really have to go out into the landscape and experience it for yourself. I mean, you know, flying over it or driving by it on highway or Interstate 80, it's just not, you don't experience it. And I think you have to go out and look for it. And I would say that she has a quote, I think it's something like, anybody can love the mountains, but it takes the soul to love a prairie. And I love it because it's true. So she's absolutely a very important figure in, like I said, teaching me to love the prairie and to really discover the beauty in it. And it's so incredible and it's so impactful. And I don't think I will ever change. I'll never go back to who I was before, like moving here and discovering how beautiful it is.
Yeah, I get asked, this is a question writers commonly get asked, what inspires you? And I struggle with it every time. Different things, usually it's something I've been thinking deeply about in that time period. Like, this is a manuscript I have not sold, but recently got it out to look at it because I was asked to by my agent. It was highly inspired by, I don't know how controversial this will be, but when Kavanaugh was confirmed to the Supreme Court, I did not like that. It felt very yucky. And so I wrote a book about oppression and the way that, very similar, that men can do a lot of things sometimes and still rise to positions of power. And in my book, that's not what happens. That it felt like a nice way to subvert reality, to write something different into the world. My second book, Three Things About Emmy Crawford, I wrote long before it sold. I wrote back in like 2017, and I was really into Hamilton at the time. And it's like a very, very loose Hamilton retelling. So, I would say my inspirations are varied, and it's just something that's really moving me in the moment so much that I feel like I need to write about it. It's kind of like coping, but it's also kind of like, can I change the story on this in a way that I think maybe would be a help to somebody, that if the story were a little bit different? So, yeah.
Yeah, similar to Allison, I would say also, I mean, I kind of spoke about my inspiration in my last, but in addition, it's super cathartic to write. And my first two books really do have a lot of trauma in them, and my experience with that, with writing and reading about that, is really, really helpful, and it's really it helps me process my own trauma. And I think there are readers out there who have the same experience when they read it, although it's not for everybody, and that's why trigger warnings exist. And it's just, I feel like sometimes the muse just visits me. Like, I just don't know that I can describe how I get inspired. Sometimes it just flows, and I know that I'm obviously the one writing it, but I don't feel like I don't feel like I'm necessarily creating it so much as just letting it flow through me. And my third book, it was just a really nice experience to write a happy story, because I was going through kind of a hard time in my personal life, and getting to write a character who actually had a happy ending felt amazing. And it was really, really fun. And now I'm like, oh, hey, this is actually really fun to write. It's not traumatic to write. So I'm probably going to keep doing it. Keep writing happy endings. I have always written. I have silly little poems that I wrote when I was in elementary school. And I actually go back and look at them, and I'm like, that's not bad, Sometimes it's really fun to go back and look at my older stuff and see, I did actually have talent, I think, speaking, tooting my own horn. But it's definitely a skill too, and it's a craft. And when I said earlier, I don't have an education, but I would say that I don't think you need a traditional education to be a writer, but you do need to work at it and study and learn your craft and hone your craft. But I wrote, since I played around with writing all growing up, and it wasn't until my now 16-year-old was around 2 that I was staying home with him, that all of a sudden I had time and energy, and I started writing really intentionally, hoping to get published. And it was still a long journey. I think I wrote 3 books, and a lot of writers will get a literary agent. It took me a long time to even get an agent to give me a chance. So I did really intend to write, to get published starting when I was around 25, 26. And I'm 40 now, so if that'll give you some idea of the process. Did that? I kind of forgot the question.
No,
did that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you need me to repeat the question?
No, I think I got it. I've written always, just not always fiction as I do the bulk of my writing now, but I think I'm an intensely emotional person, and there are many times in life where I feel like I just have too much emotion and thoughts to in my body. And so the main way I could think of as a younger person to get them out was I can't do anything else. I'm going to write. And so I have like journals full, bad poetry, lots of it. And I've read mine in it. I do not think it implied any particular talent except for just being tenacious, really. I did find my mom and dad, when they cleaned out some stuff from my old bedroom, they handed me this binder, and it was front to back notebook pages, 140 of them, of basically a fan fiction about my own life. So talk about coping. I was like, we're going to write this different. So yeah, I think it's always been a way that I coped or a way that I expressed myself. I didn't set out to be a serious like novel writer until I had time. First I did, the PhD, and I was mostly just writing for academic. I wrote the grants and the research studies and finally the dissertation. And so I got pretty good at being an academic writer, but really didn't have the chops to be a fiction writer. I like to tell stories, and I could do short form, okay, and I had a blog, whatever. But there is a craft of turning any kind of storytelling and then good prose writing ability into a novel. And boy, did I have to get an education just on my own in how to do that through partnering with people, learning from others, reading a lot, craft books, messing up a lot. So I started trying to be like more of a career writer or a novel writer in like 2016. I started taking that seriously, and also for reference did not sell a book till 2021, even though I'd written like a ton of manuscripts. So it's in there. I feel like a need to do it still, a need to it's in there. And sometimes it's for coping, and sometimes it's, I got a novel to write. I have learned, I think when I got started, I could kind of write at any time because I didn't know enough about when I was writing well and writing poorly to discern. Now I know I'm a much better writer in the morning, and so I try to clear out my first thing in the morning times on certain days of the week to do writing. I can't always do that because I have to see clients on certain early mornings of the week too, but sometimes I can work it out. And I think I'm best in like a 2 to 3 hour chunk usually. Sometimes I will go knock out like a sprint, like, okay, Allison, you got 45 minutes. Let's see what you can do. But a little bit longer is better. And I try to balance out and protect the chunks I have for that with my clinical career as best I can.
I talked about my 16-year-old. He's actually starting to write, and it's really great. He's a really good writer. He's super creative. And so we do talk a lot about process. And I feel like what I'm trying to think about what I tell him. I think there's a rhythm. It's like a circular motion to writing, at least for me. And I think for probably a lot of people, that you have like times when you're actively writing, and then you have to give yourself a break where where you're generating ideas. And I call it white space, which I don't know if it's just kind of, you have to have this white space where maybe you're taking a walk, maybe you're driving, or you're watching movies or shows that inspire you, but you're not actively writing, you're letting those ideas generate. And for me, I can write really actively for, several weeks, but then I naturally just sort of peter off. So when I'm talking to Rowan, I try to explain, like, you're not going to be able to be consistently creative all the time. And morning absolutely is my writing time. So I will be really disciplined. I actually there's a writing thing called National Novel Writing Month, which is November. And it's actually really great.
Mm-hmm.
You try to write, it's like 1,700 words a day.
That's right.
Something like that.
50,000.
Yeah, to get 50,000 in a month, which is a good rough draft, starter on a rough draft.
Mm-hmm.
For reference, like an adult book is anywhere between like 80 and 100,000 words ish. Young adult books tend to be a little bit shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Mine were around 60,000 words. So I will, you try to dedicate a couple hours in the morning to writing. And you really have to go into, some people are plotters, where they write an outline and a plot ahead of time, and some people are pantsers, which you write by the seat of your pants. So I'm a pantser for sure, although I like to have an idea of what I'm going to write ahead of time. But then, so I try to be really disciplined and like write every morning for an hour or two, although as I'm saying this, that's a total lie. I do not do that at all. That's my goal. If I do it, great. And I would say my second book was definitely written in that manner. But now, I don't know, life changes and gets busy. But And then I do that for about a month, and then I have to stop, and then I can come back to it and edit. But just generating that word count, just getting words onto the page is not something that I can sustain for much more than about a month, and then I have to take a break, and then I can do it again. But definitely, if you want to write a book, you have to have discipline. Like, you can't just write, as I said earlier, when the muse visits you. Like, you have to conjure the muse, beg her to come visit you. So I know some people have their little setup. They have to light a candle and have a little cup of tea, and that can help. Turning off the internet helps too. Having a writing buddy will help. You just go. I have a writer friend who's also another Nebraska author. We will go sit at the mill and do our 30 minutes. What do they call them?
Like sprints? Or what do you mean?
Commodore, I don't know.
The Pomodoro method.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Pomodoro method, where you set a timer for like 30 minutes and you just throw words on a page. Yep. I've said this to people, like, that you have to be tenacious. Like, that's the most important thing about writing. Like, you have to, if you want to be published, you have to keep trying, because like rejection is just, you get rejected 1,000% more than you get accepted. And you have to not just be persistent, but you have to adjust and figure out what you're doing wrong. And, you can't be defensive, and you can't say, oh, everybody who says I need to do better at this is wrong. Like, you really have to just keep trying, keep learning. It really helped to do a lot of like industry research before going. I mean, if you want to be traditionally published, you have to remember that you're a beginner and that this industry has been around for a very long time. So it's almost like you're a guest in somebody's house. Like, you need to learn how to do it according to the rules of the industry. And then once maybe at some point you'll be able to break some of those rules, but you can't go into it thinking you're going to be able to like break the rules. You have to follow the method, which is, write the whole book first, then figure out how to summarize it in an enticing way, and then try to get agents to read it. And then if agents read it and they like it, they might decide to represent you. And then if you're really lucky, you'll get an editor who will tell you have to do all these things differently. And it's a very humbling process. And if you're not humble, then I don't know what to tell you. You probably won't make your way through to publish a published book. And also you do have to keep trying. It's like, you have to believe in yourself, but you also have to be humble and learn and change and adjust. But believing in yourself is a huge part of just continuing to try. Like, if you believe in your story and you believe in your ability to like make it something that people are going to want to read, you have to just keep trying.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alena, I'll echo some of it, but I think she said it all. Basically what I would say, I think there's this delicate balance between basically ego and humility that has to happen to make this happen. I once had a client who said to me, well, you have to have a certain amount of ego to be a published writer. And that had never occurred to me. And I was like trying to get published at the time. And I thought, ooh, do I have a big enough ego for this? And I was like, yeah. But I also, I have often in this process of seeking traditional publication been quite grateful for the ropes that I had to go through, or the hoops I had to jump through in terms of becoming a counseling psychologist. One thing they have you do, at least in my program, is when they're teaching you how to counsel, they put you in a room with a real client, but they're watching you behind glass, and then like an interrogation room, and then after you're done with the client, they come out and they have all these notes for you about, well, you did this and you did this. And that is very vulnerable and very humbling. And then you talk about it with your peers, and that's also vulnerable and humbling. But that experience and learning how to be open to feedback and undefended, but also sticking to my guns when there was like something that was important to me that I really thought needed to happen, that is exactly what I have needed to then go try to be a published writer, because I have to be able to take feedback, but I also have to be able to discern when the feedback is good and growthful and I think matches my vision and maybe is good for the way the industry is running right now, versus, ooh, I think that was actually feedback I don't want to use for XYZ reasons. it's a balance game. You have to be super gritty, but you also have to be super humble. And then you have to be confident enough, but not so confident that you can't take feedback. So it's a lot of back and forth. And I think if a person can't find that balance, it's going to be a really, really challenging road for them, honestly.
I just have to echo what Allison said a little bit. Like, I think there's a little bit of insanity to being an artist. Like, you are a little bit insane until you have to believe that this magical thing will happen that is incredibly unlikely. And you have to have this like crazy confidence that your story is worth, hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands or millions, if you get really lucky, of people reading. But that insanity is the only way that you will believe in yourself enough to actually keep going forward. So
it is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Like, I'm going to send that query letter a few more times and hope that it happens.
But then it does. But then sometimes it's like, I described it to a friend as banging your head against a brick wall and hoping that a magic portal will open.
Yeah.
And sometimes a magic portal opens. And that's how you become a published writer.
Yeah. I have a few things in the works. I don't have anything else under contract right now, but I'm working actively with my agent to make that happen. I'm in a revision. Alena knows this. I'm in a revision process on something I took on that is a really hard project in terms of my brain, and so when I have to revise it, that's also very hard. It's in the YA space. I hope to sell it and then have that be published. I hope to also be published in the adult space, so we'll see if I can make that happen. I would love to just be able to keep writing. I would love to be able to keep going to do school visits. I love going to high schools to talk to students. It's my favorite part I learned of being an author. I love it so much. I would be happy to speak with adults too, but thus far they haven't been my target audience, and so I love talking to the target audience. I just hope that I get the opportunity and the privilege to be able to keep creating in a way that other people actually read.
I agree. It's an incredible privilege to keep writing. I luckily have an editor that I have an amazing relationship with. And she's been an editor for a while and is just really, really talented and really skilled. And she believes in me, and that's pretty amazing because she's now unofficially, unannounced, I've got a fourth book that I'm working on with her. And my third book that's coming out is coming out in next summer in July. And it's, I spoke about it a little bit. It takes place in Nebraska, and it's called The Broken Edge of the World. So I guess I have to plug it a little bit. It's young adult. It's a happy ending. There's a romance and there's some magic, and I'm very excited about it. And again, my fourth book is, it's aimed at younger children, but it's still children's literature. And I really love it. I would say children's literature is my passion. It's so beautiful and so important and so profound in some ways. If you're, obviously there's books that are just fun, but there's also just really beautifully written children's literature that just it still sticks with me. The Ramona Quimby books, I still hold those up as just this if only I could write like Beverly Clearly. She just encapsulates this experience of being a small human in a big world and being confused and just wanting to do a good job, and she just writes it so that as a kid you read it and you're not aware of how eloquent she's writing these experiences, and then now as an adult I look at it and I'm like, she's so talented. So I will always love young children's literature, and I think I have a lot of stories that I would love to put on paper. I think probably my most tender goal is a picture book, because those are so profoundly difficult to write. Like a lot of people say, it's like writing poetry because you have such few words that you can use, and yet they each have to have an impact, and so that makes them all the more important. I have an adult book that I've been very slowly working on. I am not disciplined at all when it comes to working on this project, but it is really special to me. It's about being a mother, and not in a happy way. It's about how difficult being a mother is and how isolating it can be, and different women's experiences with that isolation and how they respond to it. I hope to eventually get it published. I really believe in it. It's definitely one of the books that I will continue to work on until eventually, hopefully, it will be in the world. But I don't know how long it will take. It might take a while.
Okay.
Great. Welcome to the John H. Ames reading series at the Jane Pope Geske Heritage Room of Nebraska Authors at Bennett Martin Public Library. I'm Deb Arns, curator of the Heritage Room. For those not familiar with us, our mission is to preserve and celebrate works by and about Nebraska authors. It's supported by the Nebraska Literary Heritage Association and the Foundation for Lincoln City Libraries, and we're grateful for their help, which makes events like this possible. The Ames Reading Series gives Nebraska authors an opportunity to share their work with the community, and this is the 232nd program since its beginning in 1985. This program is being filmed and will be available on Lincoln City Library's YouTube channel and website, along with an interview with our authors, which we conducted earlier today. Today we are delighted to host Allison Bitz and Alena Bruzas. Allison Bitz hails from Lincoln, Nebraska, where she lives with her spouse, 2 kids, and various rescue pets. When she's not writing a novel, Dr. Bitz is helping clients in her private counseling practice, planning some form of political action, or trying to track down a pastry to enjoy with her coffee. Her debut novel, The Unstoppable Bridget Bloom, was a 2024 Nebraska Book Award winner. Her latest novel, or last novel, is 3 Things About Emmy Crawford. Alena Bruzas grew up in Seattle and currently lives in Lincoln, Nebraska with her family. She has been writing since she was a kid and writing with the intention of being published for more than 10 years. Ever Since was her first novel, and her most recent is To the Bone. When not writing, Alena serves on the board for 10,000 Villages in Lincoln, and she occasionally cooks dinner, worries about commas, and wanders the prairie. So please welcome Alena and Allison.
I brought both my books, and I'll do a shorter reading from my first one, Ever Since, and I think To the Bone has a pretty interesting author's note that I will read, and that's a little bit longer. Chapter 1. Once there were 5 princesses. No, I mean 5 witches. Actually, they were goddesses. Anyway, whatever they were friends. Once there were 5 friends, and the story goes like this. It's finally summer and we're road tripping out to the coast. Poppy is driving, so of course I'm sitting shotgun. Ramona, Paz, and Thalia take photos of their faces squished together. I say we have to make a pact to keep our phones in the glove box, and we're singing to the radio until it dissolves into static, and then we play the license plate game, and now we're playing Truth or Dare. I tell Ramona to flash the SUV next to us, and she gets me back by daring me to hang my butt out the window. Row, I squeal. Virginia, she squeals back, and throws a scrunchie at me and says I have to do it, and so I do. And I think I'm going to die when Poppy goes around a corner and I almost fall out the window. We get to La Push in time for sunset. The floor of the car is covered in garbage, and my foot is asleep, and our limbs are overlapping and intermingled. Thalia is braiding strands of Poppy's hair, and I'm painting Paz's toenails, and Row is eating the sandwich that Thalia packed for herself. We tumble out of the car with our arms around each other, holding hands and bumping hips, and the bond of our friendship seems enduring, like nothing can break it, ever. But as Edison spots us and bellows my name, and I feel Thalia's eyes all over my skin, I'm afraid it won't be enough. We're camping on the beach. No one questions whether or not it's allowed. We just pitch our tents and lay out our sleeping bags and start drinking. The beach is crowded with bare feet and loose waves and frayed and cut-off shorts. I change into my bathing suit, but I don't go swimming. Nobody swims in the ocean here. It's too cold. Even in the summer, you don't go swimming off the coast of Washington. Row gets the fire going after Thalia relents and lets us use her Trader Joe's bags as kindling, and the boys wander over all casual to drink our beer and eat our hot dogs. Rumi is putting his arm around Poppy's shoulders and kissing her neck and squeezing her thigh, and she keeps leaning away and shrugging, but he isn't picking up on her "don't touch me, I'm going to puke" signals. I can tell she's drunk because her breath smells sweet like maybe whiskey, and her eyes are wide. Poppy's always extra innocent, like, who, me? Rumi probably thinks it's no big deal because they're going out, but I can tell Poppy is annoyed, and it doesn't help that she keeps taking shots. It's funny how a night can change like that. How it can feel so good to sit under the salty, sprawling night sky with your toes in the sand that's still warm and the fire crackling and the sparks drifting and the ocean intoning nearby. Then suddenly you feel like you might puke, and people are also possibly judging you right now because you're drunk and sloppy and getting groped. Poppy covers her mouth and stumbles towards the rocks, and Rumi follows her like he probably thinks a good boyfriend should. I follow too because I know what's coming. Just piss off, Poppy says. I almost laugh because she sounds like a British gangster, but then she bends over and I hear a splatter. Rumi hovers, his hands in his pockets, looking at his feet. I've got it, I say to Rumi. He looks uncertain. Poppy yells piss off again, and Rumi blushes and glances at me, and then he leaves, and I feel sorry for him. Poppy grabs my arm, and I stagger and scrape my heel on a rock. She throws up again, so I just grit my teeth, and I let her hold on to me, and I keep her hair out of her face. When she's done, I wrap my arm around her waist, and she leans on me all the way back to our tent. I take off the rain flap because the sky is clear and the wind feels good. We lie down side by side, my fake blonde mixed with her real black, and she takes my hand and threads her fingers through mine. She's quiet for so long that I think she's asleep. When I start to get up, she squeezes my hand tighter. I love you, she says, with her eyes still closed. I find Rumi sitting alone, playing chicken with the tide. His feet are stretched out and wet from the waves. She's just drunk, I say. It's not about you. She always gets pissed when she's sick. My scraped heel is throbbing. He doesn't answer, so I examine my foot. It's still bleeding and there's sand in the cut. What happened? He asked. I shrug. Rumi stands up. Wait here. When he comes back, he pulls my foot into his lap. It stings when he pours cold water over the scrape. As he applies Neosporin and a Band-Aid, I realize that I am so absolutely determined not to flirt with him that I have no idea what to say. I pull my leg back and wedge my bandaged foot under my butt. By the fire, Paz starts singing, and Thalia is sitting in Edison's lap, and Ro yells something at Edison about punching him in the face, which he probably deserves, but I think Ro is joking. The party oozes out, away from the fire, small circles of kids here and there, and Paz and Thalia and Ro run down and splash their ankles in the water, lithe and silver in the moonlight. Edison grabs a six-pack and walks off, leaning to the side like a dilapidated house. I tell myself every time this is the last time. Thalia is suspicious, but she doesn't actually know. If I stop now, maybe she'll never find out. But then Edison looks over his shoulder at me, and I stand up, straightening my bikini bottom and brushing sand off my butt. I feel Rumi watching as I follow Edison, but I don't look back. There are enough people here now that no one will notice, I don't think. The moon is almost full, and it shivers across the water, and for a minute I feel beautiful in the bending light. So I kiss him, and of course I can't even say it. I can still hear the singing, the cackling laughter, the lewd jokes of the party. I come home to Poppy like I always come home to her. Whether it's her house, or the lunch table at school, or here in the tent, I watch her breathe in and out, in and out. It seems so easy for her. Nobody was up when I got back from Edison. The fire was almost dead, just a few embers glowing in the ash. I watched for a while and drank from a bottle of red wine that somebody left open and halfway buried in the sand. Now I lie with the bottle cradled in the crook of my arm, and when it's empty, I fall asleep on my wine-stained pillow, and bad dreams lap at my neck, but I won't remember them in the morning. Before we leave, Ramona says we have to swim. It's the summer before senior year. It will never be like this again. We have next summer, Rowie. Paz crosses her arm and squints away. Next summer we won't be in high school anymore, Paz, Rose says. We'll be off doing our own things. I'm going to France, and Thalia wants to start early at school, and your mom wants you to visit your family in Brazil. Thalia smiles with the sun on her face and leans back in the sand, closing her eyes. Poppy glowers into her coffee, and I say, what about me, Ro? Where will I be? Ro gives me a look that is wistful and uncertain. You'll be sweeping cobwebs from the sky, Virginia, but you'll be with us by and by. My toes are buried in sea foam. Ro puts her brown foot on top of my pale one. Her toenails are red and mine are teal. Our feet look nice like that, side by side and overlapping. She tucks a lock of hair behind my ear, and I smile at her freckles, which I love. She's reassuring me in her own way, I know. Maybe she's not sure where I'll end up, but she has faith in me to figure it out, is what she's saying. So, are we doing this? Poppy's hungover and pissed about it. Fine, Paz says, but then she smiles and reaches for Thalia. We run into the water holding hands. A wave rushes up to meet us like frozen blue static. We scream, and Poppy squeezes my hand so hard it hurts. And then I am submerged, immersed, surrounded by a cold so shocking I can't breathe or think. And for a second I feel terrified and almost lost, like I'll be swept out to that infinite blue sea. But to the right and left of me I am anchored to these girls. With them I am safe. And that's just the first chapter of Ever Since. And for a little context, To the Bone is a historical fiction that takes place in 1609 in Jamestown. Chapter 1. Master Collins says I can call him Henry, though yet it feels strange to say it. He says while I get water and wait in the storehouse line for grain, but oh, it is hot. My head hurts from it, and my eyes feel swollen, and my skin is tight and red. It already peels like birch bark. But I go outside to where the heat is sharp, with buckets banging against my legs. Henry, Master Collins, is already brown from the sun, his face and forearms. When he took off his shirt, I saw the white skin of his chest and shoulders and stomach. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. I am either white or red and peeling. In the line, there is some number of whispering women ahead of me. I set my buckets down by my ankles and scratch a bite through my hose. Jane Eddowes slips through the line. She pokes her mother in the side as she passes, and Mistress Eddowes jumps and smiles at Jane, who is wicked with her grin and her eyes like the deepest part of twilight. Mistress Eddowes waves Jane away from the chore of waiting for our grain. I am standing, shifting in the hot, hot sun, burning my cheeks and forehead and nose. When the Cape merchant allows me inside the dark building to collect our grain, it is less again. I watch the kernels as they slide into my basket, lined with linen to save every precious grain. Another measure he pours, one, and one, and one, and one, and one, and one. I don't know how to count, but I know the rhythm, and he stops too soon. I look up at him, but he won't answer for it. Go now, he says. The Sea Venture was supposed to arrive in August, at the same time as Jane, at the same time as me. We left home at the same time in our fleet of ships, but there was a hurricane. In the humid dark, we were battered against the sweating walls of the hull, the sounds of retching, the smell of vomit, praying, crying. They said we couldn't have any light to avoid fire, but I kept my eyes closed anyway. The men on the bulwarks watch for the Sea Venture every day, their necks craning. Jane says our food was on it, salt and pork beef, dried peas, hard biscuits, onions, and limes. It was lost in the hurricane, but perhaps it didn't sink. Perhaps it will come tomorrow morning, and tomorrow, and tomorrow. But it doesn't come. Jane is in the well house. Do you know, she says, her hair is white from the sun, and her skin is dark gold because her father is indulgent, and he lets her play outside, though yet she's too old for it. What? Master Adam and Master Franz, they went back to the country people. Jane pulls her bucket from the well. Her sleeves are pushed up and her muscles roll under her skin. But they killed them. Who? The country people killed Master Adam and Master Franz. And why should they trust them, I wonder? Master Adam and Master Franz were faithless. They had their heads beaten in with clubs until they were dead. She splashes water on her flushed cheeks. Ellis, she says, putting her wet hand on my arm. Upriver there is a place where the water is shallow and slow, and Rowan says the country people let us be. Come with me, we can swim. I can't swim, I say, but I don't move her hand from my arm. We can wade, you don't have to swim. Her eyes are bright, and I want to please her and be naked with her in the water, but I shake my head. Master Collins says I must tend to Mistress Collins. She's unwell. Jane rolls her eyes. Again? I reproach her with my frown, but then I can't help it and smile, waving as she walks the buckets back to her house, and then, I suppose, to go swim, perhaps with Rowan, though yet she is too old to be playing naked with boys. We are both too old. In a year or two we could be married, and yet still she plays like a child. At home, I was lost. I had lost everybody, and everybody was lost to me. Here, I have food to eat. Some complain it is not enough, but it is enough for me. Here, I have a home with Master and Mistress Collins. I have Jane. Here, it is beautiful. I don't know if we had a good life when I was small. I know about the things I worry about now, like food and warmth, are not the things that I worried about when I was small. Then, I only knew the things they told me, and they didn't tell me much. I remember once when Papa brought me with him to haggle at the meat market, and he bought me roasted chestnuts and said not to tell Mama. When I asked why not, he didn't answer. He only smiled and tugged me along the quay to look at the birds riding the wind. I know now that we didn't have the money for chestnuts, and he didn't want Mama to be angry with him. I don't know why Papa had to leave to come here. I don't know why he believed it was his only choice. Sometimes we bought the good flour, the fine white sugar. Sometimes we made marzipan or cakes. Sometimes Papa brought home mutton instead of fish or salt beef. Mama had time to play. She would kneel on the floor with me and play kings and queens with the small toy people Papa whittled, or she would play catch cradle. I remember when she taught me Jacob's ladder. I tied my finger in a knot by accident, and Mama giggled at me like she was small. But then Mama would never play. We never had honey or cream for our porridge anymore. Mama took in the little girls from the room above us for pay, and she bent over her bone lace in the rushlight late, after I was supposed to be asleep. And though yet there were times she wasn't doing work, she would only sit and stare and rub her calloused fingers together. Papa said there was a place for him on a ship. He said we could follow him later when he had land and a house.
He said it was the only place we could ever hope to own land and not always pay rent. He said maybe he could get out from under debt. Finally. Mama cried. She didn't want him to go. She was afraid to be without him. What if something happened to him? What would she do? Where would we go? I would push my cold toes into Franny's legs and listen to them argue. Franny slept, though, through it like she always did. She slept deep and hard, even when I had a bad dream and woke up screaming. And then, some number of months later, Papa was gone. Our house has no roof yet, only walls. A length of canvas covers the frame, but sun streams through gaping corners. We have only been here for 2 weeks. When we came, there were row houses and a small wooden church and the storehouse. We stayed on the ship, and some of the families stayed in tents. Already there have been settlers here for some number of years. All the families who come, some of us stay in the row houses, some of us have gone to stay with the country people, and some smaller number, we build houses for ourselves. Some men build, and some thatch, and others gather reeds. When I am not attending Mistress Collins, Master Collins bids me to help with the building. Mostly, I gather reeds. Mistress Collins is moaning, and her arm is over her face. I pinch my skin just above the elbow. I tell myself that I am glad to be here. The rushes are thick and soft beneath my feet. I gathered them when we first landed, when Henry started framing the walls. They smelled sweet and fragrant. Now I keep them sweet with ferns and holly, dried and scattered. Rowan says the winters here are so cold that a person can't find any green things growing. It's all brown and dead until spring again. Mistress Collins smells like vomit. I help her sit up. I hate the way her oily hair feels and her head lolling against my arm. I hold the wooden cup to her dry lips, and I close my eyes as she drinks. After, I grind the grain and check the ale. A warm, sour smell wafts up from it, and I know it's almost ready. If it smells sweet, it will be too strong. Mistress Collins, who I am not allowed to call by her Christian name of Blythe, and who Master Collins calls Bertie, is unwell. She was unwell the whole way here. I remember most the smell of her vomit as she retched all the way over. Henry comes in through the doorway with no door yet, carrying one of the baskets that was still on the ship. He goes to Mistress Collins and kneels by her. Their pallet is in the corner of the unfinished house. The sun beats on her face, her skin sweating and her eyes clenched tight. He murmurs close to her ear, and then he stands up and gestures to me. "Ellis, come here," he says. I can see his sweat through his shirt and where the white linen sticks to his skin. His face is pretty and fine with delicate bones and bright eyes, intense and captivating, hooded by dark, heavy brows. He pushes his dark curling hair out of his face and pulls a coverlet out of the basket. The stitching swirls and flows over the layers of different kinds of cloth. "We'll use it for privacy," Henry says. I hold the coverlet as high as I can, stretching my arms over my head. He ties it to a corner post of the half-finished house, and a shadow falls across Mistress Collins's face. She sighs, and Henry puts his hand on her cheek, and I let the coverlet fall, so I can't see them anymore. Even in the shade, it is stifling hot. "We'll finish the roof as soon as we can get outside the walls," Henry says. Outside the walls there are others, the country people. They were here first. Sometimes it is safe to leave the walls, and sometimes it is not. I never know when is which, and I am not permitted to leave. One of them, his name is Mark, is sitting in the dirt against the wall. I pass him as I walk to the well house. He's working on something with his hands, something close to his body that I can't see. I feel his eyes on my peeling skin. I rub salve on my skin every night because the sun hurts me here. Mark doesn't have to. My skin doesn't belong here, but his does. I am the stranger here. He was here when we came, him and his people. Back home, they told us there were already people here, but they are simple and live in a state of nature, and that they want to learn from us. They told us that the people here would welcome us, and our knowledge and our ways of life and our God. They told us that the people here would love our God if only we would teach them. But Mark, who is a little older than me, I think, he seems angry. He seems afraid. He is compelled to live here within our walls. The council traded some of our young men for him. He is here to learn our language. Some of our young men, like Thomas Savage, went to live with his people and learn their language. Rowan says Thomas Savage loves them like his own family, and they love him. Thomas Savage says they are kinder and more gentle to their children. He says it is so because look at us. Look at me and Rowan and others like Robert Poole and Henry Spellman. We are all young, and yet working alone here in this place, we are strangers. He says the children of the country people live with their parents until they are older because they love them and want them to be close and to care for them. The walls, they're made of wood. Some hold timber, some split. They are all crooked, so there are gaps in between where eyes can peer, or the barrels of guns can slide, or arrows can fly. When we first came, even before I came, we started naming things. The country people already had names for everything, of course, but we named everything on top of those names. It makes things ours. It means we're taking over.
Hello. I'm Allison Bitz. I guess Allison L. Bitz technically on the books. Here are both of my books, which I brought. And I thought about how best I wanted to represent them to everybody today. And I think what works the best is from each, I'm going to read a little passage so you can get a sense of the voice of each of these characters. And then I am going to read the author's note on both of them as well, because they are my purpose actually for writing the book. It's the most important part of me, happens in the author's note. So I'm going to start with the unstoppable Bridget Bloom. I'm going to start with giving you the sample of her voice, and then I'll read the note. Two things are immediately apparent. Dorm rooms bear a remarkable resemblance to jail cells, and they smell like Grandma Evelyn's basement, but with zero homey nostalgic vibes. I flip-flop into the middle of the joint, doing a full 180. Bridget, what's wrong? Dad snakes a suntanned arm across my shoulders and hugs me to him. My long lashes are fanning away, working hard to keep my eyes from overflowing. It's, small. Dodge, my other dad, chuckles, which makes sense. The system with my parents is that Dad comforts me, Dodge toughens me. Come on, kiddo, you knew this was the size of the room. Reading on a website that a shared room is 15 by 15 and then seeing it in person are two very different things. The cinder block walls are a god-awful shade of light blue, like someone threw a bad Insta filter over a perfectly fine cloudless sky. There's a gross tile abomination underfoot, and the trim is black rubber of some kind, I think. All of this is a far cry from my comfy farmhouse room back in Lynch, with its gleaming wood floors, original oak trim, and massive picture windows. Dad is an antique-loving contractor, and our house is his second baby. I'm number one, of course. The state of this room is confusing, really, because Richard James Academy in Chicago is the boarding school of my dreams. It's extremely prestigious, rigorous. Everyone who goes here is effing brilliant, and so I'll fit right in. Best of all, it's very, very far away from my backward rural hometown in Nebraska, where I have always stuck out like a glittering emerald in a sea of shale. But I suppose sometimes I forgot to account for the fact that it's also old, and old doesn't always mean cool vintage vibe. Sometimes old just means shabby, hence this dorm room. Just as I'm about to throw myself onto my unmade mattress in despair, I'm hit with inspiration, a Bridget Bloom specialty. This room isn't at all like my bedroom, but it is like Lynch, drab and dingy and too small for the likes of me. I'll do to it what I've been doing to my hometown for the entirety of my 16 years. I'll make it fabulous. I can't even read from this without laughing. Bridget is kind of a nightmare. And that's not, this is an interesting choice of passage for a Ames reading series, which is, Nebraska focused. Bridget doesn't love rural Nebraska. I think there's a lot to love about rural Nebraska, but that's not this character's experience. So I'll just preface it with that. And for anybody, again, watching this from Lynch, this isn't really about Lynch. So it was an accidental name choice. I'm so sorry. Okay, my author's note to talk to you about why I wrote Bridget. Dear reader, I wrote Bridget as a fat teen because I intimately know what that is like, and also because it was so incredibly important to me to create a fat character who knows her worth. To Bridget, her body just is. She is graceful and attractive and confident and talented and fat and exactly the girl I wish I would have seen that I was, hopefully minus Bridget's benign narcissism, back in high school. Bridget's mermaid costume story, which is in the first chapter, was directly inspired by something that really happened to me, but with the Bridget Bloom twist that I think all people deserve. In my senior year, I wanted to be drum majorette. With my music prowess and leadership skills, I was uniquely qualified for that role, in all ways but size. At the time I attended my tiny rural school, the same pretty, white, size 8 majorette dress had been worn for many years. I wore a size 18 my senior year. When I was indeed chosen as the majorette, it wasn't without some hubbub. How will she fit in the dress? My peers and the interested adults said with their eyes only, and in those humiliating moments, I would have given anything to be perceived as less of a burden and less of a sideshow. Anything but stepping down from the role I knew I'd earned. Eventually, my extremely kind but working with a shoestring budget teacher came up with a costuming solution. For next to nothing, one of the local moms crafted a knee-length black skirt I could wear with my usual band uniform top and gold sequin cape that fastened to my shoulders. On marching band days, I worked that cape for all it was worth, whirling it around and over my face as though I were Phantom of the Opera. The laughter was a cover, of course, for the guilt and shame I carried due to my hometown sidelong glances, taking in the size 18 body at the end of a years-long line of size 8 majorettes. There was no pretty white dress for me. I was other, and I wish no one ever had to feel these ways because of their body. When Bridget needs a new mermaid costume for the Lynch High School musical, it just happens. It's all practicality. Bodies simply come in many different sizes. There is no shaming via herself or via others. She wears the sparkly, dad-crafted fin and conches with gusto and poise, and she makes no apologies. This is the world I want for fat teens, and better yet, I wish for a world where all teens have enough arts funding to enthusiastically shell out for mermaid costumes of any size. Since my youth, I have lived in every clothes size between a 6 and a 20. It is hard work to remember that I have exactly the same amount of worth at every size because society is loud. Take up less space, say the masses, whose collective whisper is a roar. But I issue the charge, take up more space, folks, especially you, my ladies and femmes. Let your hair be big and your smile be bigger. And your ass, is that big too? Good. Be vast, be brilliant. Know that your worth as a human being is immutable. I really could have used Bridget as an inspiration and a validation when I was younger, but since I didn't have her, I can only hope she has helped you. That is Bridget. Thank you. 3 things about Emmy Crawford came from a different part of me. They're all, I think our books are all a little bit like trauma work in some ways. And so Bridget was about some of my high school stuff, and Emmy has Crohn's disease, just like I have Crohn's disease. And so I'm going to give you a little sense of her voice first, and then I will again read my author's note. So for context, this is in chapter 1, and what you need to know is that Izzy is a senator's daughter. She lives in Washington, D.C., Emmy is a senator's daughter. She lives in Washington, D.C., and she has a younger sister, Izzy, who's just 1 year younger than she is. They have snuck out of the house. They're attending a party that they're not supposed to really be at. Izzy and I don't get out to a lot of events like this for a multitude of reasons. Can I lose my Georgetown early decision acceptance status if I get caught with beer? Not to mention my family's reputation. Always on the line, always my responsibility to uphold. I've got too much going on to blow it on some random party. I cross my arms tight, wondering if I should grab Izzy and get the hell out of here. But then I see her. Head thrown back in laughter, no longer trying to disappear. Izzy is glowing, like she used to in the before times. Like I feared she never would again in any public space. My whole body goes tingly, like her happiness is catching. Liv's arm finds its way around my shoulders. Relax, you'll be fine. And because I'm hungry to believe her, I convince myself I do. She leads me into the next room, where there is a tall metal thing that she pumps. A keg, she explains. You got a keg? Nah, Ramon brought it. His parents had a catering job go south, and they had extras. Well, I guess it always boils down to who you know, I say, accepting a full cup of beer from Liv. To friends in high places. Liv clinks her plastic against mine, and we lift the cups to our mouths. Her chug is greedy, whereas mine is little more than a sip. How something that tastes like mold and sadness became the definitive party beverage will never make sense. My stomach grumbles as the liquid sloshes in, and my hand flies first over my gut. Is it a normal grumble or the bad kind? And then to my crossbody bag, where I always carry a package of flushable wipes. Since I have a disorder that insists on making my bowels destroy themselves, I always have to be one step ahead. Crohn's disease is stupid, but I am not. Normal grumble, I decide, relaxing a bit. Across the room, Izzy tastes her beer but cringes, but gamely takes another gulp. A familiar something floats in from the back deck. A solo voice cutting above the crowd noise. And then another, just as loud and articulate. The rhythm and timbre weave a song I have sung 1,000,000 times, but the context's all wrong. Like when you see your dentist wearing overalls at the grocery store. Debate isn't supposed to happen at keg parties, is it? I elbow my way onto the deck. Healthcare is a privilege and we all know it, says a tall, preppy girl with perfectly bobbed blonde hair and a southern twang to her voice.
Mary Kate Greenlee, daughter of Senator Chuck Greenlee of South Carolina. I'm friendly enough with Mary Kate. The senator's kids always know who the others are, but I do not appreciate the hot takes she's dishing. A deeper voice pipes up. Yeah, it's a privilege as it stands. Only the lucky few get the care they need. But should it be like that? No, I think. And not just because I'm answering his question. No as in please, no, not him, not now. No as in please let me disappear before he sees me. Ice and steam take turns rolling through my ribcage. From my position, all that's visible is his bottom half, but I know that voice and those signature white chucks. It's not too late to get away, far, far away, and yet my feet stay rooted to the floor as the debate continues. So this book has a lot of debate, a lot of dialogue, and that's what Emmy really wants to be, is good at debate. She's very type A, and the only other debater in the city who you were about to meet, who's as good as she is, becomes her love interest, but also her sister's love interest, so it's a bit complicated. Here's what I had to say about the writing of this book. Dear reader, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease at 21 years old. I'd been sick for quite a while, anemic, losing hair, exhausted, and having accidents that I was too embarrassed to tell anyone about. At first, getting a diagnosis was a relief because there were treatments and the hope of feeling better. But then there was the other thing, the fact that I'd be contending with a significant disease for the rest of my life. Like Emmy, I'm driven and ambitious, so a part of my coping repertoire throughout the years has been live like you don't have Crohn's disease. I, too, have shoved the bottle of prednisone under the sink when I was supposed to take it. I've skipped doctor appointments because I didn't want to talk about my symptoms, and I've pushed my body past my physical limits. I sped Emmy through a process of desperation, insight, and growth for the purposes of this novel, but it's taken me years to get where Emmy is by the end of this book. Learning to be friends with bodies that we cannot always control is more of a journey than a destination, and it's one I walk every day. I've also struggled with my mental health for the majority of my life, particularly depression and anxiety. Izzy's anxiety is built differently than mine, but I still felt a pang of empathy every time she cried, twirled her hair, or hid herself away. Again, her journey in learning to cope with anxiety is truncated for storytelling purposes, but please know that if this is a lifelong thing for you too, you're not alone. Maybe because of these things in my own life, or maybe because of my other career as a licensed psychologist, and probably both, I care deeply about healthcare equity. I am so painfully aware of how far the United States is from it. Situations like what happens to Gabe's mother are unfortunately common. The United States has largely moved away from institutionalization of those with severe mental health problems, but we have yet to build enough systems or structures to support people who struggle and their families. One example is what I've written here. When Gabe's mom qualifies for disability and Medicaid, she has access to some care and certain medications, but not what would be best for her. Sadly, Gabe's mother's situation is far from the worst I've seen in real life. Many people go untreated for all kinds of health conditions, both mental and physical, until they are in crisis. Some never get treatment. The United States healthcare system is sad and inhumane, and I say this as a provider. Access to healthcare should not be a privilege. It should be a right for everyone. I won't shut up about this, not even while heavily sedated, as was evidenced after a recent colonoscopy. I have no memory of this, but the damning video evidence does exist. I can't pretend that I have all the answers to know how to fix our system, but I feel in my bones I'll never stop trying to find them, and I hope some of you will join me. We can do better. Writing this particular story has been one of the best and hardest things I've ever done, and my sincerest thank you to you for reading along. Emmy, Izzy, and Gabe also thank you. Thank you.
So there's time for some questions, and I don't know if people kind of stand up there. I have a few questions. Okay, sure. So you're both young adult authors. Was that a conscious decision, or did the stories just lead you in that direction?
I will say that for me, it was definitely the stories. For my first book, it was necessarily young adult because I wanted to write about, from my own experiences of being somebody who dealt with abuse and as a teenager did not handle it very well. And so I had a lot of drive to portray what people would think of as an imperfect human. There's sort of a trope, I think, in the media where if somebody who's accusing somebody of abuse is not a perfect person, their stories are discredited. So I was very, very motivated to write a story about somebody who's very not perfect, who's very imperfect, who makes a lot of mistakes, and that happens because of what she's coping with. And yet her story still counts, and it's still important, and she still deserves to be believed. So that really was the very leading factor in me writing about a teenager. And then my second book, I actually considered writing it from an adult perspective, because there was no one of the characters who I was really interested in, who was a real historical figure, was Mistress Collins, who I talked about. She was an adult, presumably. And yet my editor, who is a children's book editor, liked the story, and so I figured out a way to write it from a teenager's perspective. But, I love children's literature. It's my passion. And I think teenagers deserve stories about serious topics, and I feel motivated to write about those, and hopefully I write about it in a way that's appropriate for them. And yeah.
Sort of intentional, sort of not. When I wrote my first serious full-length manuscript, I kind of didn't know what I was doing, to be frank. And, then I paired with some people who did know more what they were doing, and they read it and said, this is really good prose and writing, but I feel like your voice is better suited for YA. And I started thinking about and researching, well, what differentiates young adult novels from adult novels? And it has to do in part with the prose and the voice, has to do with the age of the character in part, though that doesn't always make the difference. And it has a lot to do with theme. And a lot of the themes that I'm wanting to tell in the stories in my head are young adult thematics, coming of age and identity search, and the things that happen when we're kind of on the road from 13 to 19. So for now, that's been a really great space for me to write within. And, I hope to write into an adult space at some point as well.
So your books touch on some really important topics. I mean, abuse and disease and chronic illness and body image. And you've interacted with young people, obviously. So how have the reactions been? Like, how have they been received, and what's been fulfilling for you maybe as an author in that arena?
So I did a school visit in one of the Lincoln high schools just a couple of weeks ago, and this was shocking to me, but beautiful. One of the girls came up to me after the event, and she was crying, and I was like, oh, are you okay? And she said, I read your book last year, Bridget. I read The Unstoppable Bridget Bloom last year, and it helped me recover from my eating disorder. It got me through my eating disorder. And then I started crying, and then I'm just hugging this girl, So that's one of the beautiful examples. I feel like I would love to have a lot more interaction with teens, because they're kind of, by default, and they should be, a protected population. So I can't just walk into a school and be like, hey guys, only when I'm invited. But when I have had the chance to interact, it's been really fun and fulfilling, and I learn a lot about what they're taking away from what I'm writing. And that was just one really beautiful example from recent.
Yeah, I will say kind of the same. My first book, Ever Since, is really something that I think feels relevant to teenagers today, much obviously more than my historical fiction. And when I wrote it, like I said, I was writing about my own experiences, and it had been very cathartic for me to read other memoirs and accounts of abuse, and that was a huge inspiration for me to write my own. Obviously not a memoir, but inspired by my own experiences. And I think there's a certain type of person who's experienced trauma who it's cathartic for them to read about another person experiencing trauma. It's not right for everybody. And like I say, that's why we have trigger warnings, because I don't want to hurt anybody with my writing, obviously. But there are people who really had intense personal reactions to Ever Since, and I heard from a lot of teenagers who shared really personal things with me, which feels like it overwhelming and wonderful and hard to know how to deal with it. But luckily, I sort of anticipated that and have a lot of resources that I can pass out. I can point people in the direction of, but I think some of them were telling me for the first time they'd never told anybody before what they had experienced. it feels like maybe saying it once will help them say it to somebody who can get them out of a bad situation or can help them find therapy. And there was also adults who clearly had experienced abuse or just knew exactly where my main character was coming from, and they had some really wonderful, gratifying things to say. And it definitely made me feel like, okay, so I did help some people. And that's a huge reason to write, you know, especially when you're writing about your own painful experiences as a teenager. You sort of motivate yourself just hoping that maybe it will actually reach somebody who needs to read it.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other questions for our authors today?
Do. First of all, thanks for what you do. Thanks for writing. We love having your books in our collections at our branches, and thanks for being here on a Sunday as well.
Sure.
I just wonder, was there one moment in time when each of you realized that you wanted to write? Was it crystal clear? Was it early on, or did it kind of develop?
Do you have a ready answer?
I think that's a nuanced question. We kind of talked about, have we always been writers? And a little bit earlier, we had some thoughts. But I think I always was writing, you know. Writing was an excellent way to cope with big feelings, big thoughts, and not having anywhere else to go with them. I don't know that I thought I would try to be a novelist till I started trying in 2016. Although I did find lately this thing from college that was like, get to know you for your dorm floor. And mine, it said, what's one big goal you have for your life? And mine was write a book. So I guess I was thinking about it. And I forgot, you know, I did school and did a family and all of that stuff. Came back to it when I had a little brain space to work on such things. So I knew I was always writing, but I don't know that I always knew I was going to be a writer or an author. But I'm really glad that happened.
Me too. I'm really glad you're
I'm
a
really glad
writer.
it happened for you too.
I mean, I'm grateful personally for Allison's books because I love them, and she's a good writer.
Same. Elena's books are really, really good. They're very
Allison's
beautiful.
books are really, really good.
And we like each other. So.
I think I feel like I always wanted to be a writer. I can't remember a time when I didn't want to write stories and have other people read them, which I think is, I know that some people create art for themselves. I definitely think I've always wanted to create art for public consumption. And I'm not sure why. I don't know where that motivation comes from. Probably because it's something that I have loved so much as a reader. And as a child, you know, I loved having books read to me, and I loved reading books. I talked about Ramona Quimby in our earlier interview, and I would still say that Beverly clearly is a major influence because she wrote for children, and she wrote so beautifully and so evocatively, and yet it was so deceptively simple. I think that really motivated me to try and do the same thing. And obviously, Beverly clearly is a master of what she does or did, so it's always a goal. But I think there was a point at which that I realized that people seemed to like my writing, you know, encouraging teachers or friends. And that just definitely was like, okay, maybe I can do this. And, you know, obviously it's an art form and it's a matter of opinion about whether or not you like any particular piece of art. So, but it's enough motivation to keep doing it and to have enough people supporting you. So, yeah.
Any other questions?
That's a great segue into the next question. We chatted a little bit earlier, but what's next for both of you?
Well, I have, I'm very lucky to have a third book coming out in 2026, July 2026, that takes place in Nebraska. And it's my first book that takes place in Nebraska. And I think maybe I've just lived here long enough to know how much I love it here. It's kind of inspired by Pioneers Park, which I say kind of because it's much more remote, and it's a place where people can actually stay the night. So maybe a cross between like Custer State Park and Pioneers Park. And I would also say that I took a lot of inspiration from Willa Cather and how she writes about the prairie. There's a lot of prairie, you know, a lot of love of the prairie. A person from Seattle comes to stay in this preserve in Nebraska, and at first she doesn't see the beauty in it, but once she kind of wades out into the grass and takes a minute to actually observe, she starts to realize that beauty is not what she thinks it is. It's a lot more complicated than that. And It's called The Broken Edge of the World. It's young adult, and it's a fantasy with some romance. And like I said before, I was very happy to write a story with a happy ending, and there's not a whole bunch of trauma in it. So it will hopefully not make anybody cry in a bad way anyway. And then I do have another book coming out at some point in the future that's also aimed at children. So
Awesome. Yeah. Yay. I don't have anything under contract right now. I do have a third YA that's completed and I'm in a revision right now that I'm talking with it's kind of like pre-dating, the kids call it talking now. So I'm just going to call it, my agent's been talking with the publisher pretty seriously about this book. So fingers crossed that they like what I am doing with the revision now. And then that, I would estimate if that does get acquired, that might put me into 2027 or 2028 with that young adult. And there's nothing definitive there. Also working on, let me back up. That book is actually that will be the saddest book I ever wrote. So we went in a different direction. The tone is very different than Bridget and Emmy. It's more pared down in terms of the prose, and it is still contemporary, but it has a speculative kind of almost science fiction backbone to it. So I took on some things that I had not tried before, and we'll see. And then I'm working actively on a book that would be more for the adult space, which is a romance or maybe a rom-com set in a fantasy world. Like if you think about Shrek, just the general fairy tale world of it, a romance set there, but it's not really about the magic or about the, it's not the main players that you would see. It's kind of like side players being written about. So that's what I'm working on, and it's always kind of, when you're between contracted works, it's a crapshoot about what actually gets out to the public. I have 11 manuscripts that I've written, and I've sold 2, and it's just some of them get taken out of the drawer and see new life, and some of them I know I just need to stay in the drawer.
They just collect dust for all eternity.
They don't need to be there for anybody but me. So, yeah.
Any other questions for our authors? Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.